The sun hung low and merciless, a copper coin in a sky bleached white by heat. Dust rolled over the plain like smoke from a dying fire, stinging Ethan Cole's eyes as he nudged his tired mule down the narrow canyon trail. His ranch lay miles behind him, little more than a patch of stubborn earth and sagging fences, but he hadn't the heart to go straight home. The thought of his empty shack, of the silence that always met him there, weighed heavier than the dry wind. A sound cut through the stillness, sharp and ragged, too raw to be the cry of a bird, too desperate to be an echo of cattle. Ethan pulled the reins tight. The mule snorted, ears twitching. The cry came again, rolling along the canyon walls, a plea carried on a broken voice. He swung down from the saddle, heart pounding in his chest. He had buried his wife 2 winters ago, lost his only child before she could take her first steps, and spent every day since fighting a losing battle against hunger and debt. Most men would have turned away, convinced themselves it was nothing but the wind. But Ethan had nothing left to lose. Perhaps that was why he stepped forward, hand hovering near the worn revolver at his hip, boots crunching against gravel as he followed the sound deeper into the canyon. Around a bend he stopped cold. Before him lay a shattered wagon, its wheels splintered, its frame twisted among the rocks. Beneath the wreckage, 2 enormous forms shifted, groaning with pain. At first glance he thought them men, broad and thick as oxen, but when one turned her face toward him he froze. She was a woman, her features strong, unmistakably Apache, and her size beyond belief. The other, pinned beneath the axle, was her twin in both stature and suffering. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. 2 giant women, trapped and helpless, their dark eyes flashing both fear and pride. They were alive, but not for long if he left them there. His mind screamed at him to turn back. The Apache were feared across the frontier. If their kin found him hovering over these women, he would hang from the nearest tree. Yet when one of them lifted a trembling hand toward him, whispering something he couldn't catch, Ethan felt his boots move of their own accord. The wreckage was heavy, twisted at angles no sane man would touch without help. But help was not coming. He pulled a length of rope from his mule's saddle, looped it around the broken beam pressing into the trap sister's chest, and hitched the other end to the mule. The beast balked, stubborn as stone, but Ethan yanked the reins, gritting his teeth until his arms burned. With a lurch the wagon shifted, wood groaning like it meant to split in 2. The trapped woman let out a gasp, her body sliding free enough for Ethan to wedge a rock beneath the beam. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. He blinked it away and heaved again. The rope burned his palms raw. His back screamed with every pull. Still he strained, planting his boots, leaning into the fight until his knees trembled. The beam lifted another inch, then another, before crashing aside in a cloud of dust. Ethan staggered back, lungs on fire, chest heaving like a bellows. The freed woman lay panting, but alive. The other sister crawled to her, massive arms enfolding her like the branches of a great oak. Then both turned their gaze on him. For a heartbeat he thought they might crush him with those great hands, but instead the taller one managed a crooked smile. Her voice was deep, accented but clear. "Small man, big courage." Ethan barked a laugh, half in relief, half in disbelief. "Reckon I'll take that as thanks." His voice shook despite the attempt at humor. They spoke quickly to one another in their own tongue, then one produced a small pouch from her belt and pressed it into his palm. Dried meat, rough but filling. He realized with a start that it had been days since he'd eaten more than a heel of bread. The 3 of them sat together by the broken wagon, firelight flickering against the canyon walls after he struck flint to steel. The sisters, though bruised and battered, moved with surprising gentleness as they roasted strips of meat over the flames. Ethan found himself staring at them when they laughed, the sound deep and unrestrained, like thunder rolling across open plains. He hadn't heard laughter around a fire since before his wife's fever. His chest ached at the memory, but for the first time in years the ache was not only sorrow. It was longing, too, for something he had thought forever lost. Night gathered heavy around them. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries rising like mischief in the dark. The sisters spoke softly, sometimes glancing at Ethan as though measuring his soul. He shifted uncomfortably, reminded of the gulf between them. They were of a people who had every reason to hate men like him, yet here he was, sharing fire and food as if they were kin. When the flames dwindled low, Ethan stretched out against the hard ground, exhaustion claiming him. He dreamed of voices in the wind, of giants walking beside him through a world that felt strange and half-remembered. A rustle jolted him awake. He blinked at the stars, at the shadows gathered along the ridge. Shapes moved there, silent, watchful. His hand went to his revolver, but something in the stillness stopped him from drawing it. Dozens of riders stood silhouetted against the moon, spears and rifles catching the pale light. His heart hammered in his chest. The sisters sat up, their faces solemn. Ethan knew at once who had come. The Apache were here, and by dawn their chief would stand before him. Whether his act of mercy would earn him death or something far stranger, he could not tell. He only knew there was no turning back. And so he lay still, the night pressing down on him, waiting for the judgment that would come with the morning sun. The first rays of morning spilled into the canyon, cold and sharp, gilding the jagged rocks in a cruel light. Ethan rose stiffly, every muscle aching from the labor of the night before. Dust clung to his clothes, and the raw blisters on his hands throbbed with each movement. He did not have to look far to see what awaited him. From every ridge, from every shadow, the Apache watched. Their ponies stood still, their riders silent, their presence heavy as judgment itself. The sisters rose beside him, battered but proud. When the riders descended, they did not move toward Ethan first but went to the women, bowing their heads in respect. The largest rider dismounted, and the others stepped back. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, his hair bound with eagle feathers, his eyes like obsidian sharpened to a point. Scars carved his face, each one a testament to violence endured. This was the chief Red Hawk. Ethan's mouth went dry. He felt the weight of every story he had ever heard whispered in saloons, of vengeance swift and merciless, of captives taken, of men who vanished and never returned. His hand twitched near his revolver, but he knew it would mean nothing here. 50 rifles could answer before he fired one shot. So he stood still, heart pounding, refusing to show the fear gnawing at him. Red Hawk approached, gaze sliding over Ethan as though measuring every fault, every weakness. He crouched beside the wounded sisters, touching their arms, examining their bruises, listening to their voices as they spoke quickly in their own tongue. Ethan could not understand the words, but he understood the tone, gratitude, insistence, a defense of the stranger who had risked his life for them. Still, when Red Hawk turned his eyes back on him, there was no softness there. "You touched what was ours," the chief said, his voice low, steady. "That is not a small thing." Ethan swallowed. His throat felt scraped raw, but his words came firm. "I didn't save Apache. I saved people. If I'd left them, they would have died. No man with a shred of decency could have done otherwise." For a moment the canyon seemed to hold its breath. The warriors stared, waiting. The sisters remained silent now, their eyes fixed on their brother's face. Red Hawk studied Ethan with unnerving patience, as though peeling away every layer of his soul. Then, slowly, he straightened. "You will not die today," the chief said. A murmur rippled through the gathered warriors, half surprise, half discontent. Red Hawk silenced them with a gesture. "You will live among us. You will carry the weight of what you did. You will eat our food, work our tasks, and sleep by our fires until your debt is repaid." Ethan blinked. The words cut sharper than any blade. Live among them? It sounded less like mercy than a sentence. Yet in the faces of the sisters, he saw a flicker of relief, even approval. The choice was no choice at all. He nodded once. "If that's what it takes, I'll do it." So began the strangest season of his life. They led him from the canyon to their camp, a sprawling circle of lodges set against a riverbank lined with cottonwoods. Smoke curled into the sky, mingling with the smell of roasting meat and tanned hides. Children darted between the lodges, their laughter ringing like bells, while the warriors tended horses or sharpened weapons. Eyes followed Ethan everywhere, some hostile, others curious, none indifferent. He was a trespasser, a curiosity, a man of no tribe, and yet he was alive. The sisters walked beside him, tall as trees, speaking to him in fragments of English. "You safe," Nayeli said, her voice steady. Chief's word strong. "None touch you. Ethan believed her, though he still caught more than one glare that promised the opposite. Work became his language. He mended tools with steady hands, guided horses with the patience of a man who had broken more than a few in his time, and fetched water until his shoulders burned. Slowly, suspicion dulled. Warriors began to nod at him, women offered him food without hesitation, children trailed after him with wide-eyed questions. Evenings came alive with song and drum, the firelight painting faces in gold and shadow. Ethan sat on the edge of the circle, at first silent, watching the sisters dance with steps both heavy and graceful, the ground trembling beneath them. Something inside him stirred an old memory of laughter by a homestead fire, of music hummed by a woman now buried beneath the earth. The ache returned, but it was not hollow this time. It was full, alive, something that made his breath catch. Tallulah noticed his silence one night and sat beside him, her bulk blotting out the fire. "You think you small," she said, her words halting but clear. "But fires see all same." She tapped his chest. "Inside, you big." Ethan stared into the flames, unable to answer. Yet in that moment he felt seen in a way he hadn't since his wife's passing. Days turned into weeks. Ethan's body grew leaner, stronger. He carried water without complaint, rode with the hunters, even laughed when the children tugged at his worn boots. The ranch he had left behind seemed like a dream, a place half erased by sun and wind. Here, though he was still an outsider, he felt a strange belonging, tethered not by blood but by survival, by shared fire and shared bread. One night, when the stars burned fierce overhead, Red Hawk summoned him. The chief's eyes gleamed like polished stone. "You came with nothing," he said. "Now you stand with something. You chose to act when you could have walked away. That is what makes a man strong, not the land he owns, not the coin he counts, but the way he carries for others." Ethan bowed his head. The words struck deeper than praise, deeper than judgment. They were truth, carved into him by every day he had spent here. By the time the season turned, when leaves along the river yellowed and fell, Ethan Cole was no longer the poor rancher who had wandered into the canyon. He was something different, scarred, tested, but unbroken. The sisters called him Brother of Giants, and the name followed him wherever he went in the camp. When the time came for him to leave, Red Hawk gave no speech, only a nod that carried the weight of respect. The sisters pressed their great hands to his shoulders, a gesture of kinship that needed no words. Ethan mounted his mule, looking once more at the campfire glow against the dark. He rode back toward his ranch beneath a sky vast enough to swallow him whole. Yet he did not feel small. The world had not grown kinder, his debts had not vanished, but inside him burned something steadier than hope. He carried the strength of those he had saved, the echoes of their laughter, the lessons of their fire. And as the trail stretched before him, he knew the story was not ending. It was only changing shape, carrying him into a future where every choice would be measured not by fear or poverty, but by courage.